and a primary school teacher, and we're trying to basically tie those two aspects together. All of my research is, in the past has focused on big scale patterns of biodiversity, and it's involved gathering data that's collected by the public, and then trying to also trying to inspire the public to go out there and collect that data. And that has actually presented quite a few challenges. It's been something that's actually very popular in recent years, but I've come to realise that there are challenges which still need to be overcome in order to, first of all, increase the amount of people get out there and doing it, getting people who wouldn't normally be interested in that kind of thing out there, but also collect data that's actually suitable for the likes of me to analyse and learn about our natural wildlife. And that's what's brought me to contact Marine Eye in the first place. Marine Eye have been very supportive in setting up the project right from the very start, and they put me in touch with Caitlin and you guys at Bluefruit. And we've been talking a lot about the whole process of the sort of activities that we're looking to provide to the general public. Right from learning about how to identify different species when they're out rock crawling, how to record them, how that data gets uploaded, but also very importantly, what happens after that data has been collected and uploaded, and how it's analysed and how that's fed back to the people who have collected it in the first place. Because at the moment, that's something which is a very sort of long-winded process. Typically, nothing really happens with the data. It could be as long as 2 or 3 years until it comes out in a peer-reviewed paper, which isn't particularly satisfying for the people that went out and collected it in the first place. So that's kind of the general area and the sort of issues that we're looking to tackle. And it's been quite exciting very exciting to work with Bluefruit on it, and particularly recently on the summer huddle. It's been great coming in to the Pembroke campus and chatting with you guys, and it's really been a learning experience for me. So I'm very keen to see what you've finally put together, and thank you, all of you, for everything that you've done, because it's definitely, whatever you put together, it's moved the whole process forward a great deal, and it'll be very, very beneficial going into the future.
Something else that we did a little bit different this year was we did an initial scoping session too. So we got together with myself and one of our other teammates, Rich, and we sat down about a month before this all started, and we kind of explored the whole problem. So we looked at, okay, everything that I wanted to do the next 5 years, where it's going to go eventually. So applying a lot of kind of design thinking ideas of okay, what's really big picture? And then so that we can help him narrow it down to have a really specific brief for this project. So a lot of that was also making sure that we knew where it was going to go and what it was going to be doing, but then how we could get to something that was going to be a useful proof of concept for this. And so that way you could come to the project with a bit of a brief this time instead of all just ideas. And the other thing we really focused on was what's something we can test this summer. So that way we're kind of proving and testing out some of the initial ideas. So it wasn't about, again, making a solution that we're going to take to market right away, or not to market, but be used right away. It was more about making something that you can test, so you can get it out in people's hands and start working on it, so then we can go back and know, okay, is that the right thing to build going forward? So it was pretty cool. So we'll do a proof of concept thing.
I think so. I think that testing thing is the thing that's been missing and really what's available already in this kind of build. Is that it's basically people put stuff together, giving it out as a general public, and they either like it or lump it, and typically they don't like it, but they don't use it. So that's been very interesting to see how that kind of works, and I think it will help us go too.
Yeah, and just to give people an idea context-wise, the alternative was kind of going out with clipboards and paper. So this is an opportunity to kind of just up that to a whole new level. So cool. At this point, I'll hand it over to Byron, who will tell a little bit more about actually what the huddle itself is about and what he's trying to achieve in running the huddle, outside of all the stuff that we've talked about. So,
this is actually our fifth Agile Huddle, sorry. The idea is we run a 2-week event. We take graduates from either schools or university, and they need to have some sort of software development experience, but we show them how software is actually developed within a company, all the bits that you don't really get taught when you're at school or university. So we take them usually from having GS programming experience and those sort of process experience, and just take them through how software development works. That's all I'm going to say, because everything else I should be able to tell you. Hopefully. So over to you guys. Right. What we probably need is if we're going to demo it, is everyone up and over here is on the phone. You seem so keen on saying
you needed the phone to be streamed to a big screen, didn't we? Got the app on the phone. Yeah, true.
So what we'll do is we'll do the demo first, demo first, and then Jacob's going to do a little bit of explaining about what all the stuff that's kind of around here, blue tacked on various desks and stuff, is all about. So over to you guys.
Okay.
Do you want to briefly explain what it actually is? What the purpose?
The purpose is to take rock pool surveys, so Ben or some other people who will be working with Ben will get some tourists, will do some biodiversity surveys of rock pools.
Yeah.
And where's that now? Is this?
I just walk them through it, just walk
Okay.
what you have to do. Yeah.
So you put a session ID which sort of marks out the identifying string of the session. Select a type of species because each different sort of group of tourists will be selecting a group of species to survey, which is crabs, fish, wracks, hens and periwinkle. Which I'm fairly certain that's not the final list, but
Not the pennies, anyway.
so I'm just going to go with crabs, and tourist IDs are entered in this, which is which tourists are actually using the device. Continue. Put something on. Okay. And it gives you a list of species. Select. I always go, select species. I hit split. Yeah. If I've selected these, they go appear here.
Targeting with our activities basically because they're going to pay for it.
That's where the money
Well, I mean, there are aspirations in the future to do that.
So why do you choose a category at the start if you're selecting everything you see? That's yeah.
Okay, so what we're trying to collect using this app is something called presence absence data. And so what the tourist does is it has a list of species which have pictures, and they'll if they see the picture, the thing that's in the picture in the pool, they'll tap that on their app, and they'll select everything they see, and by that we can also infer what they haven't seen because there's a finite list of things there. Also, the reason we have a more than one species list, species group, is because you can't. Well, it'll be difficult to select all of the things there in one go. You may miss something. The more things there are to select from, the higher chance there is you'll miss something.
But mainly it's because, as you said, the groups that people are in, they're meant to be confined to a particular type of species. That they, say one group is going to be looking for crabs, the other rats, and that. Yeah.
Yes, again, you're not clear.
He's not on that yet. So the organizer then on a different app, which is shown on the screen, so you can input data for the tide, for low tide, for time, height. So, so a low tide height can be entered between -2 and 10 meters. So I'll just put 1, 2, and you can select the location from the list. And this goes from Mars to the moon to Gilling Bays. Go Gilling Bays. And this is the update on the server, so it's you can set up the session from there, which will give them a session ID, which can involve circulate the tourists to the session.
Should explain that that's the scope. Yeah, that's what it's supposed to be. We never got that far. So we got as far as getting the app. You can input all the data, it's sending a post request. If that's not sending any information just yet. So there was a little bit of lost information from along the line here. That is something that could be implemented fairly quickly. We just sort of ran out of time. It's a future feature. If this were to continue developing.
Okay.
What's next?
Database.
So Jacob can share a bit of stuff about sort of actually getting the data out.
So what was just submitted? There are lots of numbers there, but I can't really see what the difference was. So we just select edible crab. Edible crab is ID1, and it's in the crabs group there. If I submit that, I submitted ID1, and if I run that again, then the new row is ID1 there. So that's going into the database. Yeah.
So one thing which is worth explaining with this, the idea is then that Ben can actually use that database to actually get stuff out and do his analytics on it. So at the moment, although it looks like there's not necessarily masses of features, they've had to set up a lot of stuff, so they've had to get used to setting up databases, creating databases, setting up web servers, creating apps to the internet.
Cool. Right. Is that the database?
Yeah, I think that's that bit.
Okay, I'm just going to sort of walk you through the process now. Okay. So we started off our development process with a meeting with the customer, who was Ben in this case, where we decided exactly what he wanted. And from that, we put together these two user profiles, which aren't very visible right now, but they're down here. If you want to come have a look at them in a bit. We had a customer who's our target audience for the app, and that is, in this case, Jerry. He's a tourist who doesn't know tech at all. So from that, we gathered that we need to make it as simple as possible, the app as simple as possible. We were trying to find out exactly what features needed to be in the app to give us scope as to what we're going to develop in the 2 weeks that we were running the project for. As the other user was Ben, who is the project lead. We had what he was wanting to achieve from this development. We wanted to know exactly what he wanted to be able to do with the app, and from there we needed to develop the scope as to the back end mostly. So he wasn't dealing with the user interface, the main front end of the app very much. He would be more dealing with the data coming out the back of it. And from that we were inferring what features needed to be in the database, what information needed to be collected and stored. From there we compiled some stories, which are currently up on this whiteboard here. We decided exactly what each person wanted to do and in what order we should develop them and implement them into the app itself. During the time we completed or implemented one story, we completed one story, and we were very far through doing the other two. However, they weren't quite done yet. The rest of the stories down there were listed as alert priority, and they would be implemented as the app got more developed over the next however long we were developing this for. However, to cut it short because it was a 2-week process. We, as part of designing the database and other systems, we compiled some documents which you can come have a look over here at some point later if you want to. However, I'm not going to go through them because they're not central to the project. One of the things we had to do fairly early on in the process was define done. As part of developing the app, we had to decide exactly when something was finished and when something had, when we could leave something and say this is finished, we're moving on to something else. And in this case, shall I read it out?
You read it out.
Okay, so we have 5 conditions to what done is. So we said it has to work and do what it's meant to do. So it passes tests. It has to have been code reviewed. So other members of the team had to look over the code that has been written and make sure there's no issues, glaring obvious things in it that were a problem before submitting it. It has to have been break tested, so we have to input data that shouldn't be accepted by the app and make sure it doesn't. And we had to have no warnings, including browser warnings, so we had to remove any issues that whatever code running software we were using or the browser itself. We had to make sure it didn't throw anything at us that we weren't expecting. And finally, we had to have committed it and merged it into mainline development. So we had to have it in a single program. At the end of each story, we have to make sure it works and it's all merged together, so everything that each team has developed is working together. To explain what I mean by teams, we split into 3 groups for this project. We had the API team, which was myself and Tommy. We had the UI team developing the user interface, which are the 2 front-end apps, which are these 2, and the database team developing the back-end database, which are these 2. We all worked at the same time on different aspects of the same story for most of the time, and we were using cross-platform tests, so we were each working on separate computers. We were running tests between each branch of development as we were going through it. Okay, so on this table, there is what we did in the second, what we called 3 amigos segment, which was with the customer, which was what was it called? The acceptance criteria and examples of what we wanted it to do. So this was for I believe this was for the second story that we did, which is having a way of, let's just see, having a way of doing the actual submission itself. Yes, so this was on the submitting a survey part of the app, which Aaron demonstrated earlier. This was all the tests, all the examples that we had to run that would have to work in the final app, along with each feature that needed to be tested. Yeah? Okay, so these diagrams here were part of the design that we did at the very start. We compiled a group of descriptions of what each part of the program would do. So in the case of the first diagram here, we've got, in fact, actually that's not the first one. The right one's the first one, which you can't see. It's around the corner.
Turn it around.
Like this. So in here, it's the system context. Basically, we have a short description of what each thing needs to be able to do and what each person wants from the system. In this case, we want Jerry to be able to use an app to complete the survey. We want Ben to be able to set up the survey and also get the survey out, get the information out of the database at the end. The middle, which is the piece of software that we're writing, needs to be able to collect presence absence data as a part of the Rockpool survey experience. That was basically the mission statement that we wrote at the beginning. And finally, this is some suggested outputs that would be sending to at the very end. However, we didn't get to that stage of development yet, so we haven't thought about that very much. Right, we'll turn the table back again to the second diagram. This is more in-depth as to what the system is actually going to be doing. In this diagram, it's consisting of the surveyor and organizer, which are apps on Android phones that will be provided by the Rockpool project, which we provided these also. These phones were provided for our testing purposes. They each will have a graphical user interface used by Ben for the surveyor and for the organizer setting up the stuff, and Jerry for the survey itself, when he's submitting the survey. Each of these would need to connect to a central web server, which is a API, allowing data to be transferred between the phones and the database. The database is the final part, which was written in SQL. What it's for is for storing survey results and for storing the information needed to do the surveys themselves. So, for example, that's locations, that's the list of species, and all the IDs for the tourists, and so on. That would need to be, the API would have to transfer data between the apps and the database, and vice versa. So when the apps needed data from the database, the API would send the data from the database to the apps. Right. Have I covered basically everything?
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Does anybody have anything to add before we go to questions? No?
No, let's just get to questions.
Okay, questions. Anyone got any questions?
When you mentioned the testing criteria, was that functional testing or was that acceptance testing from an end user? Did you test it with a user as well, or was it not that?
All the tests we did were on our end, so we didn't have anyone who wasn't experienced with the system using it.
Okay.
However, given each team was working on a separate line of development, we were using each team to test testing between teams, so the output of one would be fed into the API, fed into the database, and so on.
Okay.
Yeah. Give it to
How would it do the
break
beach?
in 5 minutes.
We are not in a state where we can take it to the beach.
It's not
Unless we
more
were to connect an external power supply and have no front end on the pipe. We'd have to have some way of getting the server there right now. One of the goals that we had of this project, which I forgot to mention, is all of these web pages and such have to be on the phones, and all the information kept in the phones when it has no network connection.
Yeah.
Because when on the beach, they won't have internet, or even any network connection at all, if the web server has been kept in a safe place. Of course, there was the idea floated around of keeping it in a bag or something, so you can have network connection everywhere, but that was quickly dismissed. So yeah, one of the main goals has been to have all the surveys and all the servers loaded whilst there's network connection. Then they can take it off to wherever they're going and fill up the survey and submit it when they get back to network connection. So all the information had to be on the web page before it left network connection. Yeah, that's that.
Good.
Any more questions?
Yeah, just a background on all of you, really, because I've.
Can you guys introduce yourselves?
Yeah.
Okay.
And what you're doing currently, just so I got a
I'm
feeling.
James. I'm currently going into my second year of A-levels at Truro School.
Okay.
Doing computer science as one of my A-levels. I'm interested in this because I'm looking to go into specifically game development, but also software development in the future.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm Tommy. I'm also going into my second year of A-levels. I did this because I'm interested in possibly pursuing a career in computer science.
I'm Andrew McClellan, and I'm going into my first year of A-levels, and I'm interested in is because I'm also interested in a possible career.
Sorry.
I'm Jacob Binham, and I'm looking into doing an apprenticeship next year.
I'm Esther. I guess I'm the odd one because I'm studying ocean science. So, I discovered this project through one of my professors, and I'm just interested in how you use different kinds of technologies to collect data for oceanography.
Okay.
I'm Aaron. I'm also going into the second year of A-levels, and I'm doing this just because it's interesting and I want to pursue a career in computer science.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions?
Oh, you really called Ben and Jerry.
Oh, that's it, yes. That was a bit.
We realised at the end of the second 3 amigos that we've actually accidentally named our, well, we got Ben, it obviously is Ben. We accidentally named the customer Jerry, of course it's spelled with a G, so we didn't notice for quite a while. Completely unintentional.
Yeah. Sorry, it's on the beach.
Yeah. I just sort of highlight that, yeah, no, that wasn't intentional at all.
I hadn't realised that either.
Is there any unexpected challenges that you guys came up against?
Apart from the fact that each team was working at a slightly different speed.
Mm-hmm.
So tests were, we had to write, I mean the API team spent almost as much time writing tests as writing the actual API. Because we couldn't test it with the live versions of the UI and the database, so we had to test what it was doing. And we wrote probably as much code for tests as we did actual API. That's from the API team.
As for us, it was installing we were initially going to go with PostgreSQL, but it didn't really work so well, so we went with MariaDB instead. So that took a couple of days to actually get the database set up and actually ready to input data.
How new to you guys was the whole process of how it works, and what are your thoughts on that?
Basically, all of us, I think, were doing something we haven't done before.
Mm-hmm.
I've never written an API near this, Tommy. And I didn't. Have you worked with databases before? Or anything?
I have worked with databases, but only PHP, not JavaScript.
Okay.
UI. A bit weird. Yeah, I've never made UI before. So.
Okay. So you picked up some skills along the way, certainly.
Most time
And
you're
the
using the language.
What language were you using for the JavaScript?
JavaScript.
HTML, SQL.
Node.js.
Node.js, yeah.
Okay.
You changed by
This is in my choice. So one of the things with the Huddle and the sort of agile development process in general is that it's the team's decision what technology they use, which makes it slightly nervy for me because I'm going in not knowing what's going to happen. So yeah, that wasn't my choice, that was their choice.
Web assembly was discussed.
We struggled through it. Yeah, so yeah, we went.
How do you feel about Agile as a methodology for the approach you took?
It's
Very fun.
Very democratic system.
So you said democratic?
Yeah.
In what way is it democratic?
Because you get to decide what to do and you have to reach a consensus within the team.
Okay.
I think it's very different from other work cultures. In a good way.
Yeah, that's good.
Has there been anything surprising about the development cycle that you weren't expecting, both from a developer point of view and a non-developer point of view?
How far we got?
Yeah, well, our team name is never thought we'd get this far.
Oh, okay. So you exceeded expectations.
Definitely, we got further in scope than we thought we would. So much so that we ended up not implementing parts of the scope as we got so far. So we started new things when
Scope creep.
Scope creep. Well, I don't think it was. It was more we managed to get through so much that we managed to get on to the next thing earlier than we thought we would.
That's good.
Yeah, when we spec it out originally, we were saying maybe get one species. Like, let's just do that. And so to hear what you guys have actually done versus what Rich and I were kind of saying, maybe let's keep it really simple, let's not overload it. It's amazing. You know, and that's really cool. Usually it's the other way around, right? Like you don't get as far as what you'd expect. So.
You asked for extensions.
Then how did you feel being a part of it, being non-technical and participating in the Agile process?
It was definitely very interesting, and it's exactly what I was kind of looking for in terms of going forward, what I look for in a developer if we're going to work with them, because my previous experience has all been very much on the basis of you have a job and you put it out to tender, people bid for it, and then they get it, and then they basically do it, and then they give it back to you, and then you realise it doesn't really do exactly what you want it to do. And that's because you haven't been part of that process as you go along. And so to be part of the process over 2 weeks has been really great, and it's great today to hear these guys answering some of the questions about why the data has been collected in such a way, which shows that you've actually been listening to me, which is quite nice of you. Thank you very much. And it's just so important. We're very lucky in this country to have absolutely masses of data, wildlife data, more probably per square mile than anywhere else in the world. And in Cornwall in particular has more than most parts of the country, so we have masses and masses of data. But it's all being collected in a very ad hoc way. And this big database, if you wanted to use it to answer, for example, conservation questions, so to say, you wanted to say, what if we're going to protect just one site in Cornwall, which site would it be? You wouldn't be able to use it. You'd have to really go to experts and just ask for their opinions, and there'd be a big argument. You couldn't necessarily use that database because you don't have, we're talking about the presence-absence data, quite often you don't have that. You know somebody found this unusual crab here, they haven't bothered recording all the common ones, and you don't know if that's because they weren't there or they just didn't bother recording them. So these guys have obviously really taken that on board and developed a system which fits into the way that I would like the process to work, and that would mean that going forward we'd be able to produce something that could actually answer those kinds of questions. So it's been very positive indeed.
What are your next steps, do you think, now?
Well, I mean, to push this forward and really make it happen is going to require money, basically.
Yeah, of course.
And so the next step really is to look at the options for getting that kind of funding in, and how much it might actually be, and whether we can break it up into functional steps so we can get something that we can actually work with in the field and then go out with that, or if we've actually got to get to see the process quite far before we can do that. So that is the next step, but what's been done here will be so informative when it comes to actually not just deciding what to do, but when we do the pertinent funding applications, obviously we've got a huge amount of evidence and testing to put into that. So
showcases what's achievable in the time frame as well, so it allows you to fit your bid appropriately.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, we could probably do better estimates of quite soon.
Great, cool. Thank you. Well done.
Well, everyone's around and there's not that many pastries left, but there's still coffee. And so if you guys want to have individual questions for the guys, if you want to check.
Yeah, you can come
and
try it out.
And I bought indestructible ones supposedly.
Yeah.
Waterproof, rugged phones. So.
Yeah, we haven't tested it hard.
I don't know. Tommy did drop a phone out there. So.
He caught it.
But not in the wrong pool.
When you see do you think
So hopefully that would be something that we'll look to develop, I would say, 3-4 years in the future. The software that we use for guided activities.
Thank you very much for watching. Sign up next year if you want to be part of the Agile Huddle, and check out the Software Cornwall website if you want to be involved in an outreach event like this. We've got some great stuff coming up for the rest of the summer, moving on up towards Christmas. Thank you very much.